Hello people and welcome to the People Building Podcast. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how hope is helpful in overcoming depression. And so if you are someone who would like to have a little bit more to look forward to, then just keep on watching and listening. So before I dive into the benefits of hope in overcoming depression, I also wanted to give a heads up to all of you who have at some stage in the past done NLP practitioner training with people building. Here's what's important for you to know. Last week, I was teaching NLP practitioner training, and because of the situation with COVID last year, I actually ended up doing all of the training online. And since it was online, I took the opportunity to record the whole lot. And what happened this year when it came around to practitioner training was that I changed the format ever so slightly to utilize those recordings that I had created last year. All of those recordings were uploaded into an online forum, and the delegates spent the mornings watching the videos as part of their training. So they got to get the backstory on the process, see the demo in action, and then every afternoon we came together to do the practical side of things and to put those new skills into action. Here's why this is important for you to know about. If you are someone who has previously trained an NLP practitioner with people building, we're now going to be releasing all of said videos to you, and it's going to cost you absolutely nothing. It's something from me to be able to help you keep your skills up to scratch, revisit some of the processes that maybe you didn't get first time around, just really for your personal development. And it's been a rough year, let's be honest. So I know that not everyone is able to afford going onto a course right now, or to even, get into a classroom to do the retraining is just out of the question still at this moment in time. So I'm hopeful that by providing you with these online resources that you're able to revisit your NLP practitioner training, get your teeth back into a subject area that you love, and those will be available to you forever. So we won't be taking this gift away. It's something that you can continue to use as a library to scrub up on certain skills and processes. And the really good thing is that you're able to comment on the videos. You can go back through the test paper if you want to. That's been built into the platform too. So you can actually interact throughout the platform with other practitioners by commenting and talking to each other using the chat box facility that is available underneath each of the videos that are there. There's some really great demos in these videos too, and for those of you who have had to convert your working practices to being online these days, you'll also get to see how the techniques have been adapted to make them suitable for working in an online environment too. So if you are someone who used to be on our database and perhaps isn't anymore, even though you did do the training with us, sometimes this happens because our customer management system actually kicks you off of the system if you don't engage, and so you will get deleted from our database. That might be you. So if you are not receiving emails from me anymore, but you have done training with me in the past, please send me an email. It's gemma@peoplebuilding.co.uk, and that way I can make sure that we get you re-added to the database and can also then send you out access to the online system where you can get hold of those videos that I mentioned. Let's have a chat about hope. I have a feeling I've done a podcast about hope in the past. I feel like this is not a new subject area for us, but what I will say is that I have come across some new information about it, and that's really what I wanted to share with all of you today. I was reading an article at the weekend. Actually, this is classed as a special article, and it is a paper which has been written to explore the placebo response in relation to antidepressants. It was written by Irving Kirsch at the University of Hull in the United Kingdom. And one of the things that he said in here, which I wanted to share with you, because this is kind of what's led me on to doing this podcast, right? The actual article is really about something else completely. It's actually about the placebo effect versus the use of antidepressants. I will put a link to the article in the description for this particular podcast, so you can go read it yourselves, because it is super interesting. And whilst you may have been sold on the idea of SSRIs as being a little jingle, I don't know what that one means. Whilst you may have been sold on the idea of believing that SSRIs are the way forward from a medical model in terms of treating depression and anxiety, this article might get you thinking in a very different way about SSRIs as a form of intervention. But the thing that really appealed to me in this article, and the reason why I'm doing this podcast with you today, is because it very succinctly put into words something that I've always thought and felt when it comes to overcoming depression. So it relates to hopefulness. It says here, it seemed to me that depression ought to be particularly responsive to expectancy effects. This is because hopelessness is a central feature of depression. And this is actually a quote from Abramson et al., 1978. And hopelessness is an expectancy. Specifically, it is the expectancy that a negative state of affairs will not get better, no matter what one does to alleviate it. If you ask depressed people what the worst thing in their lives is, many will tell you that it is their depression. They believe that their depression will continue no matter what they do. A very depressing thought indeed. As John Teasdale, 1985, noted, these people are depressed about their depression. If this is the case, then the expectancy of improvement should produce improvement. The belief that one improve is the opposite of the hopelessness that may be maintained in the decision, or at the very least, it is an important component of it. For this reason, there ought to be a substantial placebo effect associated with the treatment of depression. So, that is all a bit of a side note, to be perfectly honest, because I'm not going to read on the rest of that article, although it is super duper interesting. But in short, it echoes what I have noticed over the years with people who are severely depressed and are really stuck in a bit of a rut with it, that a big portion of their depression is caused by the belief that nothing can change it, that they are stuck, and that a big portion of the work that I am then doing with them is actually helping them develop a belief that there is hope, that there is, with work and time, an outcome to this, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And very often I find that even having done a consultation session with someone and just really getting them on the path towards making some form of recovery, they begin to feel a little bit better already, because we've just been able to install some hope. So I wanted to explore a little bit more around hope in itself. So I'm not going to focus so much on depression in this particular podcast, because I think that's been pretty widely covered already, and I'm sure I will end up circling back to it at some stage in the future anyhow. But what I do want to focus on is the part that hope plays in helping depression to move and disappear. So I found an article which is on iqmatrix.com. Again, I will include a link to this with the show notes for today. And I particularly like this because it gives a really nice breakdown of what hope is and what hope can do for us. I'm not going to read you the whole article, but I will share with you these kind of key traits that a hopeful person possesses. And I want to take a closer look at each one of those helpful traits, and also to potentially put a bit of an NLP/cognitive behavioural spin on how we might help someone to access those traits if they're not coming to them naturally. So according to iqmatrix.com, here are some traits of a highly hopeful person. A hopeful person is happy and grateful for the life they have, They are by no means content and therefore are always looking to make improvements. I think there's two really important things in that paragraph. So, a hopeful person is happy and grateful for the life they have. So, we've got gratitude in there. An attitude of gratitude is always going to go a long way to help you feel grounded. I actually believe it from an interpersonal skills perspective that gratitude helps you to connect with people better, because nobody likes a smug arsehole, do they? Or, nobody likes someone who's constantly moaning. Those people are really off-putting. So I think an attitude of gratitude can really bring about a lot of other important social connection type characteristics for us as people. But there's a however here. However, they are by no means content and therefore are always looking to make improvements. So, what is that telling us? That's telling us that they're internally itchy, that they won't sit still, they won't stay where they are. So, they're content with what they've got, but they're simultaneously always kind of got their beady eye on the lookout. That radar in their brain, their reticular activating system, is always wondering, like, how could I make this better? Could I make it more efficient? Like, one of the things I've noticed in the last 12 months, really since lockdown started, is being at home more really forced me into doing a lot of home improvements as well as self improvements, but a lot of home improvements. So I finished my decorating, but I also, with me spending more time here, I also wanted to look at how I could live my life in a way which is more environmentally sound. So I've made some changes to things like the products that I use, switching out tissues for handkerchiefs, and like upcycling stuff, repainting some furniture rather than buying new stuff. I think probably about a year or two ago, I switched to only getting second-hand clothes, excluding shoes and underwear, because I just wanted to feel like I was doing my bit to improve the planet, but that also in some ways this would be improving myself. It forces me to be more grateful for what I've got, and rather than sort of buying into this idea of consumerism and just replacing stuff when it's gone crappy, if I can like bring it back to life in some way, I find that really quite rewarding to do. So it sounds to me like a hopeful person is someone who is going to be kind of exploring the world around them, their environment, and themselves probably, within, and considering, can I make this any better? And so they've always got that question running in the back of their mind. Okay, a hopeful person is a big dreamer who constantly imagines a better world than the one that they currently live in. However, they are never really satisfied with just dreaming. They instead turn their dreams into concrete goals to build upon their personal values. So a hopeful person is a big dreamer who consistently, did I say constantly? It says consistently. A big dreamer who consistently imagines a better world than the one they constantly live in. Just think about that for a second, how powerful that is, and how contrasting that is to the people that we know, which may indeed be you, who consistently imagine the world as being a dark, miserable, terrifying, ugly place, and how differently that's going to impact upon your psychology, to thinking about the world as constantly being placed as somewhere that can be improved upon, and seeing it, like imagining it being that way. Because the good thing is, when you do that, even though you're not there yet, you're kind of living as if you are. It makes you act as if, as we would say in NLP. So you can think about how you want life to be or how you want your future to look, and by imagining it, you're kind of entertaining the idea of already being there. And then you sort of neurologically and emotionally set yourselves up for that outcome, so that when it does come along, it feels like it fits, because you've been living that way in your head for so long already. However, they are never really satisfied with just daydreaming. They instead turn their dreams into concrete goals, and build upon their personal values. So what we're saying here is that hopeful people, and this I would say is something that almost appears to contradict with hopefulness. I think it's easy to believe that hopefulness is desperation. Hopefulness is waiting for something external to happen, something that steps in and saves the day for you. And actually, what we're saying here is that if you're a hopeful person, you're proactive, you're a doer, you put goals in place, you make things happen. And I think a lot of people don't think about hope that way. I think a lot of people think about hopefulness almost as neediness, and it's not that. That's not been the way that I've seen it. I have probably told this story on the podcast before, but I remember there was someone I was dating once, and we were talking about business or something like that, and I mentioned about being hopeful of some kind of outcome that I was looking to get. And he said, hope is the currency of people who believe they have already failed. I've never forgotten those exact words. Hope is the currency of people who believe they've already failed. And I kind of looked at him like, what the fuck did you just say? I was like, what? And and he was like, yeah, like hope is it's a bad thing to be hopeful. Like hope is ugly, hope is desperate. And I said to him, my little cousin is called Hope, actually. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was like, not really, but would have been bad if it was. And we ended up having this like quite deep technical discussion about how we thought about hope differently. And I remember being quite offended in a way, you know, I was like quite aggravated by the perception that he had of hope being such a bad thing. And I remember thinking, you know, I'm not a particularly religious or spiritual person, but I feel like hope is something that really underpins faith or is a part of faith in some way. And how disrespectful it was to almost think of people who have that faith and hope as a you know, just a kind of key value in their lives as being like desperate and needy. I was like, you really don't understand what hope is. But anyway, all right, what else have we got? So a hopeful person approaches everything with a sense of curiosity. They are curious about life and about the world around them. Given this, they are constantly in the act of exploring and experimenting in an effort to make things better. I think that that's super important. We talk about curiosity a lot in NLP, particularly on the practitioner training that I've just finished, which is possibly why that word has piqued my interest, because I was literally talking about it a week ago. So one of the things that we say about NLP overall is that it is about having an attitude of curiosity, about kind of saying, how can this work? So you're always going at things with an expectation of a positive outcome. You're never sort of saying, could this work? It's more of a, how could this work? Like, how can I play with this to make this work out for me? So I would agree that there's definitely something running parallel. There is some kind of connection between hopefulness and curiosity. Hopeful people are curious about life and about the world around them. Yeah, because I think you've got to somewhat, like, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to be out there in the world, engaging with it in order to get the very best out of it. And in some ways, hope needs fuel. You know, it needs nurturing and it needs stimulation. In order to stimulate your hopeful senses, you need to be out there in the world, engaging, interacting, being curious, looking under rocks and everything else. Because when you do that, what it does for you is it's a bit like, let's say that you took a day off work and you went to the beach, and whilst you were there at the beach, you're maybe like looking in some rock pools and seeing some little crabs running around. Maybe you're there with the kids and you're picking up cockles and winkles and you're skimming stones across the sea and all of these sorts of things. And at the time, it just feels like, you know, you're kind of out there in the world having a good time. But later, when there is some sort of problem or challenge that shows up in life, those sort of what seem to be just curious external experiences that we had can often form the basis of helping us to problem solve difficult things. Have you ever had something like that happen, where you've maybe come away from an interesting scenario where, you know, you were just there to have fun, but later that thing becomes the metaphor or the anecdote or the solution to a problem that you've currently got? So I remember on NLP practitioner training, there's a process that we use called chaining anchors, where you install positive states for someone across their knuckles. So each knuckle has a series of positive emotional states that move them from a stuck state.
Okay, I found this on the web for a series of positive emotional states that move them from a stuck state. Check it out.
Thank you. Literally never asked for that. So we start off with their stuck state and we finish on the emotional state that they want to be in instead. And in order to install all of those positive emotional states across their knuckles, you go through a process of remembering a memory. I'm like paraphrasing here, installing it on the first knuckle, and then you have to break state, so kind of change the subject for a second, and then you go on and install the next one. And then you break state, you go on and install the next one. And once you've done that, you need to test them all. So then you test it, break state, test the next one, break state, test the next one. And it's like quite a lengthy process. And I always found delegates really struggled to remember all of the instructions, even with the script there in front of them. And then one day at our training venue, I realised that they had an alarm code which was for different portions of the building. And in their instructions that they'd given me for setting the alarm, they had me set the alarm for each individual area one at a time. And I'd have to wait 30 seconds in between setting one area for the alarm to stop bleeping before I could go on and then reset the alarm for a different area of the building. And one day I thought, why can't I just set them all in one go? This is a really long-winded and unnecessary process. I thought, well, I guess the worst case scenario is I set all the alarms off. So instead of doing it one area at a time, I basically told the system, program this area, and this area, here's the code. And the system went, okay. And I was like, oh my God, it's a revelation. Well, funnily enough, the next day when I went into training, we were doing the chaining anchors process, and I suddenly realised that rather than them going through the anchor chain across their client's knuckles twice over, once to do the installation and then once again to test it, they could do all of that as they went along. So they could install the emotional state, break state, and then test it. Then move on to the next one. Install the states, break state, and test it. And they've remembered that so much more easily than when we were breaking it down into nitty-gritty pieces. So I think that that curiosity and that exploring and experimenting actually helps us to solve problems in completely different areas, because sometimes something in life teaches you a lesson for a completely different area of your life. It will solve a problem somewhere else. Okay, next thing on the list is a hopeful person accepts that life brings no guarantees, no matter how hopeful they are. However, they will always do their best to make the most of every situation. And that last portion is in bold. They will always do their best to make the most of every situation. Yeah, I think I agree with this when it is an authentically hopeful person. So I'm going to make a distinction here. I'm going to say that, particularly in the self-development world, we have a tendency to attract inauthentic, hopeful people. And to give you a description of this, an inauthentically hopeful person is someone who believes that they have to remain happy no matter what the circumstances, and that they have to be positive and grateful no matter what the circumstances. And it ends up actually making them seem a bit fake and unrealistic. Actually, quite annoying, if I'm being completely honest, because, as this has said, there are no guarantees in life. And all you can really do is make the best out of a bad situation. I think it is valuable and important to acknowledge crappy stuff when crappy stuff happens, and not to just dust it with a layer of sugary stuff and make it seem like it's okay, because maybe it's not okay. What was that really annoying saying from last year? It's okay to not be okay. But I mean, yeah. It's not even that it's okay to not be okay. It is that it is, like, sometimes it's just not okay. Like, that's it. It's that sometimes bad stuff happens, and we can acknowledge that bad stuff happened. We just don't want to live there full time for the rest of our lives. So it's about saying that no amount of hope is going to guarantee that life will then bring you what you want. If you can make the best out of so it says here, every situation, make the best out of every situation. It's really about saying, like, I'll squeeze what I can even out of the bad stuff. I'll see if there is something to take from it, something to learn from it. And one of the key things that I say to people is, sometimes the acknowledgement or the learning is in saying, I don't know what good there is to come from this just yet, but maybe one day I will. Because bizarrely, when you think in that way, you might get 10, 15, 20 years down the line, suddenly that old event will pop back into your mind and you'll be like, now I know what that was all about. Now it makes sense to me. So I think you have to be patient with hope. And that's what I would tag on to that last statement about hopeful people accept that life brings no guarantees, is that and making the best out of every situation, is that you may have to wait a long time sometimes to be able to make the best out of every situation. But if you can have an expectation that ultimately good things will happen for you, then it just makes life feel a bit nicer, even if it's not technically true. So that's better, isn't it? Alright, so a hopeful person accepts that every experience has some form of value and benefits for them. In other words, no matter what happens, they remain hopeful that in the end, things will turn out in their favour. So let me read that one again. That was quite wordy, and also my iPad went off, so I'm not going to lie, I was faffing around a little bit. So it says, a hopeful person accepts that, yes. I just suddenly went, oh my god, it's not filming anymore. It's fine, it's filming. Panic over. A hopeful person accepts that every experience has some form of value and benefit for them. In other words, no matter what happens, they remain hopeful that in the end things will turn out in their favour. Oh my god, it's literally what I just said. Okay, clearly I hadn't read this in advance. I just got the gist of it, and I thought, this article is my kind of vibe. I think I'm going to roll with this for the podcast today. So yeah, that I fully agree. Let's go to the next one then. A hopeful person always maintains a positive outlook on life, no matter how grim or dire the situation. This is, of course, only possible because they are highly attuned to their negative thoughts. The moment negative thoughts take over, they immediately switch gears and reframe their experience. Okay, I have a little teeny tiny problem with this one in that it says they always maintain a positive outlook on life, no matter how grim or dire the situation. That I would say is bullshit. I don't think that that is true of all hopeful people, and I actually find that statement to be a little unhelpful because it sets the bar too high, too optimistically high, and I think actually having a rough moment is important sometimes. You know, sometimes you need to have a bad day because it might force you to put your foot down or make a change or demand something that, you know, previously been unjust or unfair for you. So I don't think that always having a positive outlook on life, no matter how grim or dire the situation, is realistic, achievable, or healthy. I would disagree with that. I do agree that hopeful people are attuned to their negative thoughts. I disagree that they immediately switch gears. You know, it's okay to not be okay. It's absolutely fine to have a rough day. Like, that's okay. You don't need to immediately switch gears and immediately reframe the experience. I think ultimately reframing the experience is a good idea. I think ultimately, you know, if you've had a bad minute, writing off the entire rest of the day is a bad idea. But I think, what do I think here? I think what's important is that you have the choice to change how you're feeling when how you're feeling isn't serving you. And that's something that I think hopeful people can do well and get right. So it's not about saying immediately switch gears and get rid of all of any dire consequences or circumstances that exist in your mind. I don't think it's that. I think that's wrong. I think what it is about doing, though, is being able to make informed choices. Like, if I want to write off today as a bad day and just sit here watching This Is Us for 3 hours, then that's my prerogative and it's okay for me to do that. But there comes a point where it's like, enough now. Like, we need to think back on what's happened and reframe the experience. I do not entirely agree with that point, but I do absolutely support the value of reframing. We have a couple of processes in NLP that we use for reframing. So if it's not something you're naturally good at, then you can sort of develop the mental muscle to be able to do so. In short, one of them is about taking the same behaviour or emotions that you're experiencing and putting them into a different scenario, and that kind of reframes the experience then, so that, you know, it becomes funny, or you just kind of get to see it in a more helpful way. And sometimes it's about keeping the scenario the same but changing how your perception of how you're showing up in that scenario, and that helps you to see it from a different perspective. So reframing can be really valuable. It tends to be a lot easier to reframe other people's problems than your own. But as I say, there is a process there to enable you to reframe more successfully. Okay, a hopeful person tends to live in the present moment. Yes, they do spend time visualizing a better future for themselves. However, they clearly understand that only by making the most of the present will they ever stand a chance of bringing that future into reality. Interesting. So this kind of ties in with mindfulness, really. In the world of mindfulness, a big proportion of that is about being in the present moment. Very often when we get stressed out, anxious, worried, etc., we end up being in our heads. So we're in the inside world instead of out there in the outside world, living our lives, engaging, interacting, you know, feeling the ground beneath our feet, feeling the breath in our lungs. All of those mindfulness and meditative activities that we do get us grounded back into the present moment of now and get us back in our bodies. And because we've alluded to the fact that a hopeful person is quite future focused, They're looking on improving themselves, visualizing, setting goals, working towards them. We might be inclined to believe that their heads are kind of in the clouds, or that they're constantly like planning the future and they're not really here enjoying the moment of now. Actually, what this is saying is, yes, they do spend time visualizing a better future. However, they clearly understand that only by making the most of the present will they ever stand a chance of bringing that future into reality. So it's a bit like saying, you can set a goal of owning a Ferrari, and you can really, like, you remember in that film The Secret and the book, like, you can really visualize being in your Ferrari, driving your Ferrari, having a lovely time. Unless you do something in the moment of now that helps you work towards being able to buy a Ferrari, then it will only ever be a visualization. So this is kind of what this is saying. If you're going to be a hopeful person, you can't just put all your eggs into the future basket. You've got to be taking action in the right here, right now, that moves you closer towards those eggs in the future basket that you want to have. Okay, a hopeful person consistently takes proactive action in the direction of their goals and objectives. In other words, they don't just hope that things will work, that things will be better. They work hard to ensure that things will get better. I think I just said that, didn't I? So yeah, it's about putting in the hours, putting in the effort. It's so funny in a way that coronavirus really has forced me to change the way that my businesses are operating. And it's only now that, having kind of put in as much work as I have over the years, and then having to sort of make the adjustments over the last 12 months, that I'm kind of looking at it going, holy smokes, like, thank goodness I'd worked so hard throughout my 20s and my 30s, like really putting some of my own stuff to one side and just really going for it, setting the foundations of what I have now, has meant that I've had a far easier time working through COVID than a lot of other people have. So yeah, I think that I think yes. What was I saying? I was saying they don't just hope that things will be better. They work hard to ensure that things do get better. Yeah, so I think it is about kind of, sometimes you have to go through the pain now to know that it's going to pay off further down the line. All right, a hopeful person regularly builds on their past successes and achievements. In other words, they learn from what they have already accomplished in order to make the most out of the current situation they find themselves in. I feel like I said that one already. Regularly builds on their past successes and achievements. Yeah, it's kind of samey. All right, let's just go to the next one. A hopeful person always focuses on being generous and giving. They clearly understand that by giving to others and by helping people overcome their problems allows them a greater depth of understanding about their own personal struggles. Ooh, that's nice. All right, let me read it again. So, hopeful person always focuses on being generous and giving. They clearly understand that by giving to others and by helping people overcome their problems allows them a greater depth of understanding about their own personal struggles. I think that that's true. Is it explicitly true of hopeful people? Yeah, maybe it is. I would be inclined to assume that a hopeful person... Now, here's a question. Is hopefulness something that you can be taught? Or do we think hopefulness comes from having gone through adversity and having come out the other side of it and gone, like, being able to look back and go, like, I mastered that somehow, so now I've got faith in myself. I'm going to have more hope when I come toward a similar challenge in the future. I'm inclined to agree that that would be an ingredient. Can you teach hopefulness? Possibly. Yeah, possibly. I think sometimes people, like, let me give you an example. I have families that I sometimes work with where there are maybe like super optimistic, positive parents, but then like a bizarrely negative, um, miserable child. And the parents are like, this isn't who we are as a family. Like, where did they come from? Where does this attitude come from? So I think that sometimes teaching a hopeful, positive, or optimistic attitude, I don't know if you can teach it. I think to some degree you can. But if it was like a nature nurture debate, I would say that the nature is inferior to the life experiences that you come up against. I think life teaches us to be hopeful from the experiences that it puts us through and the ones that we come out of, able to dust ourselves off and move on from. So I think it would make sense that a helpful person not just focuses on being generous and giving, but also has that ability to understand other people's personal struggles because they've probably been through some struggles of their own, and that's what leads them to have more empathy, and it's what leads them to have greater levels of understanding. So my guess would be that that's where that particular trait comes from, is from having had a rough time. It's caused them to become more hopeful, and it also then allows them to share that hope with others when they're going through difficult experiences. All right, so a hopeful person constantly seeks out opportunities, help, and support. Ooh, okay. They understand that only with other people's help will they have a chance of getting what they want. Interesting. Okay. So I've got a few thoughts about this one. They constantly seek out opportunities. Agree. I think a hopeful person is looking for answers and solutions. So, of course, they're going to be seeking out opportunities. Seeking out help, though, I feel like that's a little bit of a different animal just for me personally. I hate asking for help. But, I can also see the flip side of it though, where it says about only with other people's help will they have a chance of getting what they want. And I can kind of tie into it from that perspective, in that if I thought that I wasn't going to be able to move forward without other people's help, then I would be more inclined to ask for it. But if I thought that I could do something independently, I'm much more likely to behave that way. That's just me. So, overall, would I agree that a person with hope is also a person who is comfortable asking for help? I think that they are. I just wouldn't agree that it is a sort of definitive trait of hopefulness, um, because I know, like myself, there are hopeful people who are also more self sufficient than they might be reliant on others. Okay, the final one then is a hopeful person lives with gratitude. They are thankful for what they have, however, this never prevents them from seeking out more of what they want. Which sounds very similar to the very first one that we read. Was it the first one where we talked about the attitude of gratitude? Yes, it was, yeah. So I feel like that one is kind of echoing that very first statement once again. I do think that overall hopefulness is a lot more proactive. I feel like there's more energy that goes, like literal pushing, moving forward energy that goes into being hopeful than people expect. And that too, then, going back to the conversation around hopefulness and depression, shows why it's sometimes so challenging for people that are experiencing depression to be able to get themselves feeling hopeful again. Because with depression, there is most often very low energy that goes with it. As a generalization, it is a low energy state, it is a low movement state, it's a very stuck place to be in. Whereas actually hope has got quite a lot of oomph and welly in it. There's quite a lot of movement and motivation and drive in it. And so if a depressed person is kind of lacking that drive, it's ultimately probably the thing that they need the most. So before I wrap up for today, I guess the question then is, how do we reinstall that sense of hopefulness in someone when they are feeling a depression about them? And I think that it comes down to keeping our expectations small and starting with a flicker of hope. I think that if we were to have a conversation with someone who's super depressed and to say, you know what you need is a bit more hope. You've got to feel like, whoa, pizzazz, whoa, bang, get moving. I think it would be overwhelming and it would probably just piss them off because it's going to be a long way from where they are right now. I think our role as practitioners here is to provide them with a flicker of hope. Something that gives them the light at the end of the tunnel, but not necessarily a bright dazzling sun in their face just yet, because they're not calibrated to that yet. It's about giving them enough to get the momentum, to get moving, and building that up then slowly and gradually and keeping moving forward. And so that might sometimes sound like it's okay for you to have a bad day. It's just not okay for you to live there full time. It's okay if the rest of today is great, but then tomorrow is lousy. Because sometimes when we are improving ourselves, it's not like a steep incline of upward trajectory towards our goals. It's very often a little bit wibbly wobbly and all over the place. You're not following a straight line in an upward direction. It peaks and it troughs. One of the things I say in one of my hypnosis scripts is that even a dart that is destined to hit the bullseye is peaking and troughing as it moves through the air. It's just that our eyes can't, comprehend that, can't see that is what's actually happening. But it is. It's not cutting through the air as straight and direct as it might appear to be. So it's okay for us in our journey to improve ourselves to kind of have up moments and down moments, some days that are better than others. What we want to be able to do is then to look back over the previous 6 months and see, actually, things got a lot better and they can get better even still. So that way we keep our expectations reasonable and achievable. And that's where we then start to see these flickers of hope coming through for people. Because in their mind they go, that sounds doable. I think I can do that. I haven't now met a coach or a practitioner who is asking me to get up at 6 a.m, go do star jumps in the park and then eat a healthy breakfast and go to work with a smile on my face and be kind to my boss for the entire day. That would just be that's going to just make them feel even more stuck because it may feel so far from where they currently are. Whereas if we say to them, listen, tomorrow do one thing that makes you happy. Tomorrow do one thing that, to compliment yourself, that makes you feel good about yourself in some way. And let's just start taking steps in the right direction. Let's just start by being a bit kinder to yourself, saying nice things to yourself inside your head, catching yourself if you're being a bit mean to yourself and reframing that so that you're more fair and reasonable and kind to yourself moving forward. All of these things give us the flicker, and the flicker is all that we really need to help start moving someone onto the right path. So that is everything that I wanted to share with you for today. It's around hope. I will leave the links to the 2 articles that I've mentioned in the description box, either below the video if you're watching on YouTube or below the podcast if you are listening on some kind of podcasting platform out there in podcasty world. If you have enjoyed either watching and listening to me today, then please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you are on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell so that you get notified the next time one of these videos comes along again, or subscribe on any podcasting platform where you like to get your podcasts. And give this video a 5 stars if you are an iTunes person, because that really, really helps me out and I appreciate it loads. Thank you very much. Alright, but for now, thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, bye!